This is Faculty Focus from Fairleigh Dickinson University. This episode features Dr. Alice Shumate, Assistant Professor of Biological Sciences. Dr. Shumate is an evolutionary biologist who studies, among other things, the dynamics of plant-insect interactions. Her current research project is in the New Jersey Pinelands.
An evolutionary biologist can be a lot of things. One of the things that, people tend to think an evolutionary biologist as someone who goes and digs up dinosaurs, and a lot of the fantastic stories that we think about for evolutionary biologists are history, they're fossils. And there are a lot of evolutionary biologists who do that, but in fact there are a lot of people who work on modern day living species and look at really small scale evolutionary processes that might be happening over a couple of years with currently living organisms. And this is just gradual change. We tend to run around and think about nature as red in tooth and claw, and it's survival of the fittest, and or it's a dog-eat-dog world, and it's all about blood and guts and death. And in reality, a lot of species have a lot of variation in reproduction. And the process of evolution is really all about passing on your genes to the next generation. And if you have a really favorable combination of traits, and that favorable combination of traits has some genetic basis, not completely, but some genetic basis to it, and it leads to your passing on more copies of your genes to the next generation, then over time in that population, your genes are going to be more common and the other less suitable genes will be less common. Any ecosystem has a whole lot of players in it, and there are lots and lots of insects that live associated with all types of forests. And one of the groups of insects is called a bark beetle. And what bark beetles do is they get under the bark and they feed in the phloem. This is right under the surface of the bark in a tree. This is the layer for nutrient and water transport in a tree. And so these beetles get underneath and they tunnel around in there. And what they end up doing as they're tunneling around is they girdle the tree. And that kills it. Once you've cut off that nutrient transport between the roots and the top of the tree dies. What we've seen now is temperatures have warmed just enough that we have a species of bark beetle moving up from the south. It's called the southern pine beetle, and it's incredibly damaging all across the southeastern U.S. and really across through Texas and the middle portion of the southern United States. They kill huge numbers of trees. They're incredibly economically damaging to the forestry industry in the south, and these beetles have just started to show up in New Jersey and appear to not be getting killed off in the winter. It's not getting just cold enough. And so you do hear a lot about things like introduced species that are brought over by humans from other continents. And there are a lot of species of insects, and other things too, but I tend to think about insects. There are a lot of species of insects that are in the U.S. because they were introduced, normally inadvertently, sometimes intentionally, by humans. Things like gypsy moths. And gypsy moths create a lot of damage. They can kill a lot of trees. And, as humans, we can think, oh, well, this is my fault and I should fix it. I should go out and spray and eradicate these gypsy moths. The southern pine beetle moving north is just a natural range expansion. They live just south of here, and they have for decades, or hundreds of years, really. And so if the environment is changing and they're moving up here on their own, is it really up to us to decide that they shouldn't be here? That's one answer to the question. The other answer to the question is, do I like having pines in the pine barrens? And if they're going to decimate the pine barrens and kill off most of the pine trees, maybe I've decided that that environment, or we as a society have decided that that environment is important. And if it is, then we're willing to do something, to step in, even if this is a natural change, but one that could potentially be catastrophic.